We are back with another episode of Middle-Aged Mamas. You guys, the gang is not on here today. What is it, Friday the 13th or what?
On Sunday.
It has been quite the day, but we do have lovely Gaynell here.
Yes.
She is also a middle-aged mom, although she doesn't look a day over 30.
Right.
We will get into everything Gaynell, but let's start off with a little bit of highs and lows because I got to get this off my chest. Oh my gosh. So you guys know we always record with Camila and Dawn, my girls, and we have a special guest. And when we have a guest, we always come to Inglewood because Camila's house is cozy. She has the couch. It's just a better vibe for four. So somehow it didn't get communicated to our third person that we were in Inglewood today. And Dawn calls me 20 minutes ago ready to shoot at my house. So she's not here. I honestly feel a little naked today. Yeah. But we're going to roll on and get to know Gaynell nonetheless.
Yes.
So that's my low. My high is that I'm just happy to meet you.
Thank you.
So anybody else got a high and low?
I have a few highs. So my first high is that I got my nails done.
Okay.
Oh yeah, you've been naked.
I have my nails I had no nails on.
Okay.
And normally my natural nails are very long, but over the the Christmas holiday, I got COVID. I had a fungus nail, and so I couldn't have my nails on. So it was just a whole situation. But anyways, the other day I got my nails done. I feel more like myself today. And so that's my high. And so my other high is that our last episode about family secrets, I got a lot of good feedback from that episode. A lot of family members calling and just not sharing secrets, but just sharing how they felt about the episode. And it was a really good episode. We had a lot of good talks. We didn't give a lot of deep, dark family secrets, but just like some surface stuff that got other people to thinking and talking about how they would rather reveal the secrets versus keep them hidden. So it was a really good episode, and I got a lot of good feedback.
I'm curious how many people are going to do their ancestry after that episode. If they're actually going to find out things or just let them be.
Or if they're the secret.
The one that you sent me, because now you're sending me a gazillion DMs of people searching, because we were on opposite sides. I was saying I would not want to do ancestry DNA because I don't think it's going to change your life. And Camila's like, a lot of beautiful things can come from that.
Right.
So she keeps sending me examples of how it could be great.
I know. I won't do it either just because for me, it's just, I don't want my DNA. I don't know where my DNA is going really.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I just don't
want to know. Don't even want to open that box.
Exactly.
So, but I know people that have had really good experiences with that. So I guess it's just an individual thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a roll of the dice.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So what about you? What was your high this week?
So probably, I was trying to think, it's been a really busy week. I think two highs. My daughter had made honor roll.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then I went to see my tax guy. I always dread taxes, tax season, getting my taxes done. And thought I was going to owe, and I don't. So that's very good.
That is a huge high.
So that was probably my highs and lows for that's my highs. Lows though, I have elder parents that I am caring for in a way that I never could prepare for. My parents still live on their own. They're married. But my father is starting to have challenges. So with that, it's kind of undergirding my mother. And I don't know about you guys or if you've dealt with people that are elderly, but it's constant. So I'm doing my thing, but then my mom will call me all day and, I need this, I need that. So kind of bouncing around this past week, much busier than usual. So that was kind of
And are you on your own with that, or do you have siblings?
So I have
helping?
siblings. However, if you know anything about having siblings, there will be some that are available and more helpful and capable actually, and there are some that it's
pass the baton,
a burden, or they just are not. They can't do it, and they're not stepping up.
That's always the case in every family. It's always one person that steps up,
either
delegates. But I also heard that if other people help out, even financially or just in different ways, everybody doesn't have to do the same thing.
But just some of the burden.
Right. Absolutely. But there's always a leader
Yeah. Oh yeah. For
I
sure.
can see myself being that leader one day.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure my parents are well taken care of.
Yes. Yes.
So you are in the police force.
Sheriff.
Sheriff department.
Yes.
Yes.
You would never know that when you walked in. I was like, wait, what? I was expecting someone totally different. I don't know why. This is my first time meeting you.
I get that a lot. Even friends from many moons ago, if I run into people, they're like, I still can't believe that that's what you do. It's just because who I am as a person, my personality doesn't add up to the stereotypical what we believe a police officer kind of carries themselves as or is like.
Right, which is really cool to see. I'm so happy that you're that representation today.
Thank you.
How did you get into...
So, to make a total long story short, I mean, I grew up under the umbrella of law enforcement. I grew up with a father that was in law enforcement. My father was on the sheriff's department for over 30 years, and then retired and then became chief of police for the city of Gardena. I had an uncle that was a police officer. My oldest brother was a sheriff. So I was umbrellaed under that with no intentions, though, of ever going that route. And really the crux for me was, in all honesty, I had a child very early. At 18, I was pregnant right after high school, my first year in college. And I felt like I was struggling with staying in school and living with my parents with a baby. And there was something inside of me that just wanted to be my own independent self. And so, you know, it was like I needed a job. And I needed, not like I was working a part-time job and going to school, but I needed like something secure with benefits. The crazy part is, at that age, you're pretty idealistic about life. Like for me, I felt like, oh, I'm just gonna get in this job and then I'll leave when I find something else.
Yeah.
And not knowing that the process, the once you get in, like this is a career. Like people were striving to do this. And when I started being next to people in the academy that this was like their goal, to be a sheriff or a police officer, it started to become different for me. And it was like, in my mind, I still was like, no, I'm gonna do a few years, and as my daughter gets older, I'm gonna go back to school and I'm gonna do this. But once I got in, at 20 years old, making the amount of money that I was making and having the security piece underneath me of benefits and insurances, and it just wasn't a leaving. I kind of just...
So at 18, you can just
jump. It was a process though,
It was
right?
a process. So I applied at 19 as a jailer. That's how it started.
So what does a jailer do exactly?
So a jailer is just a civilian. So they only work the jails or station jails. And all that.
So you guys, when people come through, when they're admitted into
and they're
jail
processed,
cell,
so you're gonna see in the jails, and I think people don't know the difference between the sheriff's department and an LAPD or other agencies are. The sheriffs are in charge of all of the jails and the court system. So LA County jails, no. They're only patrol. They're just patrol officers, and
then they send them to you guys.
So when they go to jail, they're booked in. That's all the sheriff's department. So all LA County jails, the stations where they book in at the jail for booking, it's the sheriffs. So sheriffs are in charge of the jails and courts, all court services. So initially, the jailer was an attractive job. It was, you only had to be 18. You go in, it's called custody assistant basically, but you go in and you work the jails. And there was all different shifts because jails are 24 hours.
Right.
So I felt like I could go to school and do this and blah, blah, blah. And then I got in as a jailer at 19. And then when you start working, you're working shoulder to shoulder with deputy sheriffs, because when deputies graduate from the academy, they go straight to the jails before they go to the street.
Because they have to work their way up,
right? So in the jail, I'm like, I'm doing the same job that the deputy's doing, but they're getting more money. And then I had a culture of friends within that job that were all testing. Oh yeah, we're testing to be a sheriff. You should take the test. And that's really how it went. I took the test, and then the next thing, I stumbled into it. And at 20, and this is how I really thought it wasn't gonna get to that point for me. At 20 years old, I thought, well, when they called me and I got through backgrounds and I got through my lie detectors and all the stuff, they called me, the background investigator, and said, "Are you ready to start an academy date?" And I was like, yes. But the first question I asked, this is how young I was like, are we paid while we're there in the academy?
I mean, are you? That's a question.
Until we fail out, because
Right.
in my mind, I thought I was not going to make it.
Right.
So I was like, they said yes. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And if I fail, can I go back to being a jailer? They're like, yeah. So I was like, okay, I felt better about it, because in my mind at that time, everything that I had heard about the academy, knowing that I was about to give 6 months up and have that strenuous thing, I didn't think I could make it through. And I did. And then the next thing, I was going step by step. I was passing this test. I was getting through this. To the end, I was graduating.
Wow.
So-
And
sorry,
I was
go
a
ahead.
deputy sheriff.
You're like, I look up
That's
and I'm
really-
just a deputy sheriff.
No,
So
I mean, it's really how it happened. It just was not, people want a dream story. Like, this was always my dream job. Like, it really wasn't.
yeah.
It wasn't far from it.
But I'm sure there was a comfort level, and your family have gone through
Absolutely.
that process.
They
that you
helped
kinda,
me. My dad kind of
Right.
gave me advice on what I was going to experience.
Mhm.
I think deep down inside, my dad felt like he wasn't quite sure if I was going to get through that either, just because of the kind of life I had already lived and who I was. I'd been in private school all my life. I was just not really tough. I wasn't considered tough. You know what I mean? And so I think there was points, I'm sure my parents were like, maybe she will, maybe she won't. My dad kept track of me, like, how's it going?
Right.
Giving me advice. But I made it through. I got through, I graduated.
You surprised yourself?
I did. And it really gave me, that was like my first sense of a huge feeling worthy and
Yeah.
accomplished, because I even doubted myself, and it just made me see I was stronger than I kept giving myself
Right.
credit for.
Yeah.
It's like, you could do this, and even getting in, there's steps once you get in. You got to work the jails, and then there were a lot of steps along the way that I doubted myself and still thought, like, ooh, is this gonna work for me? Then I'd see my paycheck, and at 20 years old, I'm like, oh yeah, this gotta work. I gotta make this work.
Yeah.
I gotta pull up my bootstraps and get in here. And then
Right.
too, I had a daughter, and it was like, I wanted to I didn't want to be just a single mom, young mom who was constantly depending on her parents. That was big for me, because I felt like, even though in the beginning I felt like this was kind of a setback. I mean, no one's trying to have a baby right after high school.
Right.
In the long run, it turned out to be one of my biggest blessings, because it really kind of helped me track myself very early on. I had to jump up and figure it out.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And we talk about all the time how self-worth comes from achieving and accomplishing
right.
things. It's not someone telling you how beautiful you are.
Right.
It's about filling yourself up and saying, looking back, I did that. And you feel
Absolutely.
so much better about yourself. So
Absolutely.
you are a wonderful example of that.
Thank
I was
you.
gonna ask, did the desire for wanting to be a sheriff or for that position grow as you were accomplishing step by step, but you kind of answered that.
Yeah, I feel like it did. I think probably, the hardest piece of my career has been patrol. It's just no ways around saying that that's an easy job. Answering 911 calls, getting in that black and white, suiting up every night in a bulletproof vest, and loading up your car, and having to trust your partner, and putting yourself in so many situations was my hardest time.
And and as a mother, going out there
Girl,
and
let me
doing
tell
that
you.
night after night.
Let me tell you, when I went out, I avoided patrol. So the sheriff's department lets you be in the jail. And then if you're lucky enough and they're needy enough, you can go to court services as a bailiff.
To get bypass it.
Oh, so you found
Well,
ways.
you can't totally now you can, but back then you couldn't. Patrol was mandatory. At some point you had to give 2 years at the
2
least
years, wow.
that you have to go out and you have to be in the black and white. So I was trying to strategically avoid it I was in the jails, and then I was like, oh, I want to go to courts. And they sent me to courts, and you're allowed one extension. I put in an extension because they're like, your numbers are coming up, you're going to patrol. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
I put in an extension, and then I was working Beverly Hills Court as a bailiff. And then as soon as my extension came up, just so happened I was pregnant, was like, oh no, I can't go out. I'm having a baby. Sorry. And then I thought they would forget about me. And literally, I'll never forget.
Set you to the side.
I had my second son. So now I have 3 kids at this point. One was 12. My oldest was 12. My son was 2. And my little one was, I had just had him, and then he was like 4 months old. And they sent me, I came into work, and they're like, you know, your numbers are up. And I was like, for what? They're like, patrol, you're going out. And I was
so
like,
that day?
They tell me, so they give you, it's just to tell you to prep.
That's how like jury prepare.
You gotta go, you're leaving, say goodbye to everybody. And I was like, what? So I thought it seems ridiculous now. But I also, at that point, I was a little postpartum. I had a 4-month-old baby, I had a 2-year-old. I really cried, like actual tears. I was like, oh my God, what? Patrol.
Because the thought of patrol and what goes on out in the streets.
And not only that, the hours. I was like, my little one's like, what? So I remember thinking, okay, I gotta go. So I gotta figure out, I was married at the time. And he is a firefighter, so that schedule's 24 hours.
I was gonna say, you probably married a community helper as well, right?
Yeah, so.
You guys were both gone.
We were. The only way it was gonna work, I was like, I don't know how, and it just so happened, I have a beautiful, amazing aunt who's widowed, who was living by herself at the time. And I was like, once they gave me my work week schedule, I said, could you come live in our house?
Oh, wow.
I was on a Wednesday through Saturday shift, and you know, I'll get you everything you need, we'll do whatever we can, and then when my ex-husband, when he comes in, he'll relieve you and you could do whatever, but we needed the help.
But the fire department, they sleep there for
so that's why I needed her there in case his shift was overlapping. Listen, it was a blur. That time was so crazy for me, but the craziest was when I finally went to patrol school. They send you to a 2-week patrol school to kind of refresh you from stuff you learned in the academy that you don't remember anymore. And then they sent me out to West Hollywood Station. I was working graveyard. They told me my hours were going to be at 8 at night to 6 in the morning. The reality for training, and I think people don't understand, you go out 6 months, you're a trainee. You have a training officer, because you've never worked in that car before. They have to show you all the ins and outs. So I don't want to say hazing, because it's just not a hazing process, but there's a game that's been instilled from the very beginning. It's not as bad as it used to be, but I was out there before a lot of other things were going on. So you knew you didn't wear your jacket at night. You knew that you weren't going to break out a lunch and eat during your shift. And when your training officer was eating at IHOP or you were writing reports, and you knew that your shift starts at 8, but you're going to be at that station at 6:30, prepping that car and getting yourself together. And you knew,
like the rookie.
Yeah, and when you knew at 6 a.m., you weren't getting off at 6 a.m. because you had to stay back and write reports. And if you booked people in jail, you were still going to be there. Yeah. So sometimes I would have 14, 15-hour nights or days on training. That was the most brutal time for me. There's no ways around it. I remember a coming to God moment when I finally went out, my son was 6 months old.
I was gonna say, you did all that and then came home to it.
And the end was nursing. Woo. And I remember thinking like, oh, how am I gonna do that? So I remember sneaking in and having a breast pump in my locker. And I remember like, oh, what I'm gonna do is when I have time to go to the restroom and we break, I'll run upstairs and pump and then get back out there, right? And little did I know, there were some nights that we would be so inundated with calls after call that we weren't stopping. And I'll never forget one night, this was like my coming to Jesus moment. I didn't think it could get it probably didn't, when I think about it, it didn't get worse than this. We had a night, it was raining, we were getting back-to-back calls. And I had only been on training for a couple weeks. And so you're not gonna start whining to your training officer, like, oh, I have to, and I remember that we're not breaking. And I remember feeling my breast swell up.
I was gonna say, you're all
and I have on a bulletproof vest.
And just pressing
I literally felt like I was about to die. And we had a vandalism call at 7-Eleven. And I remember thinking, like, I'm going to, like, I got to do something. Like, what? Maybe I'm just going to, I got to use the bathroom. And then I remembered, like, learning, you know, this was my third, I knew how to
push it out,
pump into the bathroom. 7-Eleven, by the way, has the worst bathroom you ever want to use. It's not, and no, they're not open to the public. The crazy part is they're not open to the public.
They're just not clean.
But they're it's like, I guess they just say we're never ever.
No one's coming in here. Yeah.
I remember asking, you know, they'll let you guys go.
Yeah.
And I told my training officer, I really have to go to the restroom. He said, well, you have to go in 7-Eleven. I can't get back to the station right away. Do you have to go bad? And I said, yeah, I do. I go in this 7-Eleven bathroom that looked like, girl, I didn't even want to put anything anywhere. And I remember unbuttoning my shirt and I was shaking and my breasts were so engorged and my t-shirt, I took my vest off, my t-shirt was soaking.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember thinking, what am I about to do? And the first reaction for me was to cry. And I said, no, you're not. No, you're not. Girl, no. You got a whole nother 6 hours left, and you're gonna have to pull it together. And I grabbed some paper towels and I ran them under the hot water and I self-pumped my breast in that nasty 7-Eleven bathroom. And I thought, girl, if you can get through this,
I know all your liquid gold going down.
No, you are
that make you cry.
Yeah. But I did. I got through it.
Oh
and
my God.
When I think back on those times and what I went through, it's all been a journey. It's all been worth it in the end because it created something in me that really wasn't there before. Like, in all honesty, I was normally a person that would give up really easy on stuff. Mm-hmm. I would cry about stuff a lot, like, oh shit, you know, like, oh, the world is falling down. There was a lot of me prior to getting through that, even prior to patrol piece, even though I was on the sheriff's department. I always have had a hard time with worthiness. Mm-hmm. Always feeling like I had to perform, be at my best. I gotta be the best. I gotta show you, look, you know, isn't this okay? Like, right. For validation, these things. All of those things that I went through really increased my own sense of validation for myself. Yeah. Also, it's something about looking at the world in a lens of, because I think people forget, when you're on patrol, every call that you're getting is someone's worst day. Someone is calling 911. Yeah. It's like human misery at its best. Whether it's slight, whether it's heavy, you gotta go, you gotta make split-second decisions, and you're exposed to so many things that people are going through. Right. It causes you to say, you know what, my stuff's not that bad. You know what, actually, what am I thinking that I'm not, you know what I mean? Or just the level of that it taught me about life and people and being more not as hard on myself, being easier on myself. Mm-hmm. And because when I was able to do that, it really gave me a sense of being a good police officer. I feel like policing with empathy and compassion and those things just all lined up too, just with what I was going through in my own personal life.
Right. How long were you patrolling? How long did you
So I patrolled for almost 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And I had my last daughter. I was pregnant on patrol. They put me onto the desk to answer the 911 calls during my pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And then after I had her, I was like, you guys, I gotta get out of here.
Put you back out there?
And so I did go out for a little bit after I had my daughter, when I was after my maternity leave. But then what we do is you can test out. So basically for promotion, and that's what I did. I started taking the test for promotions so that I could promote out of the field, because the field was just too much. And as a mom with multiple children that were needing me at home, it was too much, because I was the mom that was going to go home, and I had been working all night and all morning, and I'm still going to be laying down, and I'm in a nurse, and I'm still going to make myself available. But what it was doing is it was depleting me completely.
Yeah, because there's only so much of you.
Yeah. I was just like a shell of a person after a while. It's like, I gotta get out of here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And so you promoted out.
I did.
And so you are now a detective.
Yes.
Okay, and that's a desk job, right?
It's a desk job. and I'm on the easier side. I only do misdemeanor tickets.
Okay.
Oh wait, so just people who get
tickets.
Like tickets.
Wait, so they need a detective for tickets?
So because you have to process them like everything else. So you have to file those with the DA's office.
Okay.
And it's really like, it's called a shit desk because it's not a specialty. It's not forgery, fraud. It's not robbery and burglary. It's just all the tickets. Mm-hmm. But I'm fine with it because it's created a great schedule for my children.
Right.
Especially having gone through a divorce, I need to be available. Right. And it's just easy. It's look, I shuffle paper.
I mean after you went through
that was
so many years of
you deserve
shuffling
that.
This and doing that, you should have the cushiest job.
Yes,
imaginable.
And you know, it's something about our department. It is a level of reward for you. I feel like as you promote, things do get easier. Yeah. Because you have put in the work.
Right.
And you did go out there and you did do that hard stuff. That hard stuff it's no other word for it. Right. It's hard. And I think that you know, it's so many layers to it because you know, I could go on and on, but it's a difficult job.
Yeah. So while you were patrolling, the guns stayed where?
So you have a shotgun in your car. Uh-huh. You have a smaller gun somewhere on your person, and you have your duty weapon.
But all of those stay at work?
No, they go home.
Okay, so
except the shotgun.
Okay, so once you get home, how did you handle that
safe.
With children in the house?
A safe.
Okay.
Securing it. However, with boys, curiosity. Yeah. As my boys have gotten older, I showed my kids. Mm-hmm. Like
at what age?
This is what the gun looks like. This is where it's on safe. If you pull it, it does this. You know what I mean? Probably, I think my oldest son was 10. Okay. And so my other one was 8. Okay. But I showed them because I'm also a realist and I've seen other things happen to people. Mm-hmm. And I think that it just snuffs out that curiosity so they don't go digging for it and try to see it themselves and do something. Right. So and just I've always and I've explained the magnitude of it to them. Mm-hmm. You know, I've told them, you know, there have been people whose kids play with this and hurt another child on accident. Right. You know, it would be a terrible thing to accidentally shoot your brother or, you know what I mean, that happens. And did you show them, although you have a safe, did you show them where the safe is, or you just said this is in the safe? No, I just said this is, I don't even know if I pointed them out to where the safe is, but I just showed them, like, if you ever see my gun somewhere, this is what you do not do. Okay. Like, you don't start touching and fiddling and playing with anything. And I've told them other people, you go somewhere and someone shows you one or produces one. Oh, absolutely not. Like, you need to be very careful. That's a serious thing. Right. Don't let anybody tell you it's play, just do this. No. Right. Absolutely not. And I think the more I've learned just from even my own calls in the field and seeing tragedies, I've learned too, exposing and telling your children a lot of things early on, it's just helpful. I don't know, like some people are into like, I don't think they're ready to hear this. You know, I don't think, I'm not going to say this to my kid. I'm not going to, you know, I have a different way. I feel like there's age appropriate conversations, but these kids now are very different. They're exposed to so much that I like to keep a level of like openness of, look, this is what it is. And I'd rather you come to me and I'm going to tell you exactly instead of getting lies or hearing through TikTok something you know. Yeah. And they trust me. My kids they've asked me things or they've come to me. Sometimes I'm like, I didn't want to know that. So you suggest that if you are a civilian, a legal loan owner, you should have pull it out. I think you should. And that's my opinion. Yeah. So that the level, and you know your child, the level of, especially curious children. You could say all day long, guns are dangerous. I don't want you to touch this. Don't you dare. Some kids, the curiosity, they're not listening to that. They want to touch it. I would rather my kids touch an unloaded gun in front of me so I can show them this is how it operates when it is, and the curiosity piece is gone now.
Right.
They've seen it, they held it, they know it's dangerous.
Right. That's really
Yeah.
good.
Well, that was my next question. Was part of the exposure showing them how to use it, like as they got older, or like you have a 17-year-old, right?
Yes.
Did you or have you guys gone to a gun range and
So no,
taught
I
him
haven't
how to
done that
shoot or
with
anything
him,
like that?
but I have told him, like, in an emergency, if I ever told you, like, I needed you to get my gun, like, this is, because what I had showed him earlier, like, how this is a clip, this is, you know, how this is unsafe, this is when it's not unsafe. I've taken him to shoot. I don't think he really is ready for that, but I have shown him that, like, you know, just in case if you ever saw, you know, something going on.
Right.
But yeah.
Along those lines, what have you told your own children, you know, just to be out in the world as they encounter law enforcement? How have those conversations looked in your house?
So very thorough, very real, because I'm not also, as a police officer, going to sit here and tell you that Black and brown people are not discriminated against, and we don't have a lot of injury from law enforcement, because we do.
And we're treated
that's just
differently out of
absolutely,
the streets.
and it's the origins of law enforcement. If you really start going back in history, I mean, let's be real. I've had this conversation in trainings, and it's not always received well, but it's the fact of the matter. The origins, slave patrol was law enforcement. You know what I mean? Our communities have never really been able to trust law enforcement. Civil rights movement, I mean, we were hosed down by police officers. So to pretend like that doesn't exist, that our boys don't have to have a different conversation behind the wheel of the car than a Caucasian boy, you're ridiculous. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. Yeah, we're in 2024, but
we're also in
it's
2020.
yeah. So I've told my sons, you know, for one, tone and your attitude right off the bat set a feeling. It's a very scary position to be pulled over by a police officer. Even me, when I see lights, I'm like, who's this?
And you might even know it. You're like, hey,
it's just a thing. Like, it's a thing.
It's like an innate
is
because of us being
because
Black.
of what we have gone
Yes.
through. And so for me, I've told my son, especially my oldest one who started driving, that you want to don't start, because I've had this experience on my own pulling over African American young men, or I haven't said anything yet, and they're automatically like, "Don't come, what are you know what I mean?" Let's start down. Let's start low. The first thing you always want to do is start looking. You want to look right away when they approach your car at a name.
Okay.
You know, a badge name. You're always going to have a name tag. Always have your hands seen. I tell my son, as soon as you pull over, turn on that light. Turn on the light in your car.
So they can see
So
everything.
there's no question. It was dark. They don't have to flash a flashlight on you.
Just
You
turn
already
it
have
on
the
for
light
them.
on, the overhead light. You pull over. They have to tell you why they're pulling you over.
Okay. Now, is that the first? I haven't been pulled over in a long time, thankfully. But is that the first thing that they say is, I'm pulling you over because?
They should definitely tell you.
And
I'm pulling you over because.
Okay. And if a kid
Sometimes they'll say, do you know why I'm pulling you over?
Oh, right.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
Is that a trick question?
I haven't been pulled over in I don't know how long, but I can remember. But that's the first
many,
question.
You know, and it's sad. There's so many different scenarios they have. Sometimes before the police officer can talk, the person in the car is saying, why am I being pulled over? And then sometimes, depending on the kind of cop you have at the car, they're going to say, I'm asking the questions, don't you? You know.
Yeah.
Then you start a thing.
Right.
So it's like, be cool and calm. They cannot start pulling you out of the car unless, you know, I tell my son all the time, don't have people in that car with the car smelling like weed. Don't give reasons
Give them a reason.
for this is why we pulled you out of the car smelled like marijuana. You know, you've got a friend back there shifting around doing something. You know, there are countless reasons that they can backpedal and say that they, you know, and because on the end of where I've been, there are safety measures that we have to take as police officers coming up to a car as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's with anybody and anything. It's like, you know, if you've got passengers, I need to see what these passengers are doing. We have had law enforcement that have been killed on traffic stops. So it's a sensitive thing. But for my sons and young black men and brown men, I think the more educated they are on the laws of a stop, the better equipped they are if they get pulled over. And like I told my son, that you can always, if you're feeling uncomfortable from the tone, if you feel scared, anything, you can politely say, you know, I would feel more comfortable if you could have a supervisor come.
Oh, that's
because
good. I've never heard that
every
before.
agency has a supervisor that's also patrolling. It's
Okay.
their patrol supervisor
Okay.
that can come out and be present on whatever's going on. So if an officer is trying to pull you out of the car, you can say, you know what, please let me, could you get a supervisor here? I don't feel comfortable. Let a supervisor be present.
Right.
It also gives the officer awareness that you know what you're talking about, you know what's going on, you're not, you know what I mean? Don't start getting in the shouting match, don't do any of that. Because there's also these little loophole charges of being, you know, resisting arrest, and you're not, you know, that's been forever. They'll do, you're not resisting arrest because you're not obeying direct orders and this, that, and the other.
Now, should they already have their license and registration out, or is that something that you wait for an officer to ask for?
It just depends. Like, if you can get it, like if you have it right there and you can get it out before they start approaching your car, it's a good idea to do that. But if not, I always tell my son, just put the overhead light on, have your hands on the steering wheel, and if they say, hey, you tell them, hey, I have to, my ID is here in my pockets, right here, or my registration, I'm just going to open the glove compartment. And I think it really brings everybody down, and everybody's kind of like, you know. But we've had that discussion on that. I've had discussions on being the passenger in the car. If you have a friend that starts going all crazy and mouthing off to the police, you know, there's just a way you have to carry yourself, what you have to do. Because my thing is, I want my sons to be safe.
Right.
And so it isn't about appeasing a police officer, it's I want you home safe. Because if it's gone wrong, even if they're doing something they're not supposed to, be cool about it, because there is a complaint system
that you can use.
We can go through. Getting the names, the badge numbers, everything now with body cameras is being recorded. And then we let us as your parents, and then we do it the opposite. Then I do it the way of complaint. That's big for me, because you start going back and forth and it could be, I don't know. You know what I mean? I want you home. And so we'll do the complaint system. The other thing is, complaints aren't how they used to be. I think people think, oh, they'll throw those complaints away. They're not listening. It's not the same. For one, you can't go into a police station to file a complaint on an officer, and that is not just, oh, a supervisor comes out to listen to you and then you go away. No, there's a whole process now. There's civilian boards that actually monitor that stuff. So it's very different. And I always tell people, like, it makes a difference. If you're not getting the service that you needed, complain.
That's good to know.
You know what I mean? Do what you have to do and complain, because it is what it is.
I had a quick question. I want to go back a little bit when you said that you have the right to ask for a supervisor. Can they reject that? And I also wanted to know, the body cam is also recording. So if you ask for that, if that's your request, they have to do that.
Because they do, unless, I mean, the only thing I can think of is they say, our supervisor is tied up on another call, X, Y, and Z. You could ask for what that supervisor's name is then, and, you know, then maybe can we wait? I'd feel comfortable, like, explain why you feel uncomfortable, or can you get someone else here? Like, I don't really like how you're approaching me, or X, Y, and Z. I mean, there's ways around it, but for the most part, they'll roll a supervisor. Unless, like I said, if you're in a busy part of town, supervisors could be tied up on an emergent call with other units. That is a possibility, but it's worth asking if you don't feel okay.
Right. And what about name dropping? I have a friend that's a sergeant, and every time we're at a party and we run into him, he's always like, do your kids have my number in their phones? Like, he wants to make sure Uncle is in the phone. And we always tell them, if you're at a mall.
You should.
Yeah, if you're at a mall and you're with a group of friends and somebody's doing something they're not supposed to do and they round everyone up.
So you absolutely should.
Yeah.
I've had people call me.
Okay.
Hey, we have this person here that's saying they're your,
Yeah, so that
is. And it makes a difference. It does. It is a thing. I mean, my kids have my business card.
Okay.
It's like, let them know that your mom.
He only does that for, kids that he knows and he expects
absolutely.
the
and
care
I
to
only
be
do it for
right. Right.
Members.
It's not just where it's like
right.
everybody, but that has been mentioned several times.
It makes a difference.
Okay, that's good to know.
I mean, in this life, I don't care what industry you're in. When you know somebody else,
and listen,
it's helpful. I mean, it is. It absolutely is.
Okay.
I have, even for my own self, I have pulled over people or gone on calls where someone says, my dad is, and I'm like, okay. And it does, sometimes you will, let's say you have a relationship with that person or the status of that person. It causes you to take a little caution.
Yeah, or they're vouching basically for your character.
Absolutely.
And that's what I tell my kids. Your character needs to be on point because there are people who will definitely be there to support you. But if you acting like a fool, don't drop that name.
Right. But that's why I tell my sons, just don't get mouthy.
Right.
Yeah.
Just stay cool, calm, and collected.
Okay.
And you know what you're doing. You know what's happening. You know what they should and shouldn't be doing. Mm-hmm. And if something starts leading somewhere else, you know what to say, and especially as a minor. So it'll change as he's an adult, but as a minor, I always tell them you feel comfortable if they call your parents.
Right, because they can't. I was gonna say they can't call us
mom,
from the
call
car,
dad, right? Or they can say, well, you want to call him right now and put him on speaker, or you could say, I don't feel comfortable. Could I please call my mom or my dad?
Because I have a son that will definitely be that way.
I've had
nervous.
I've had that before. I've had kids I've pulled over that are minors driving, and they're scared, and I know they are, and they're like, can I call my mom? I'm like, okay, put her on speaker, put the phone here, call your mom, let me explain to her what's happening.
It's also interesting because I have 3 sons, and as they were little, they just loved the police department, and one of them dressed up for a kindergarten. My husband made a whole cop car out of cardboard. Like he's still that way to this day, still waves at all the officers. So thankfully, we've had a really good relationship with a lot of the officers in our neighborhood. It's just, it pains me that, the conversation could be different just from an encounter that might go wrong. So we still tell them to respect officers and smile and wave and always thank them because they are, that's you were out there. But
and it's understandable. I feel like it's never going to change.
You mean you're not optimistic about the future of the community and the police department?
Only if we would start policing our own communities. The problem is when I go to the job fairs and when I look at the applicants,
other races,
we're not applying to be police officers.
And why do you think that?
Well, I get it because of the perception. Of course, we have a stigma. There was a time too, let's be real. There was a time that, our applications are probably looked at differently.
We have an example of that.
Okay, so that's there. And then the more and more that we've seen in the media, the injury, the untrustworthiness, we're a loyal people. We don't want to be a part of something that we feel is going against us. But the bigger picture is this is a vast departments. These are vast departments. And just as with any organization, you can show a pocket full of corruption. There are some good, fine people doing this job every day.
Yeah.
There really are. I've worked with them side by side. And even a lot of people with meaning well and maybe not coming off a certain way just out of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we're putting police in our communities that have no idea about us. They don't know about our communities. They don't know, and we're not there. We're not there to police our communities and to be that, you know what I mean? And I always say, I don't see a lot of change that can really start occurring until we would start stepping in that role in our own communities. And
I'm sorry.
just, yeah.
That's really interesting because I know you can not probably
Right.
speak to this, but it's really interesting because I remember not too long ago, or maybe a few years ago, that Compton had its own police department, and I kind of saw that as them policing their own community.
Like I said, I feel like the biggest piece in all of it is, if I don't know anything about a community that I'm having to go in at their most vulnerable moments and police, it's a disservice.
Yeah.
And just like even for me, I was born and raised in LA, but even working West Hollywood Station, I had to be extremely sensitive and knowledgeable to the LGBTQ. You know what I mean? You have to know. You're not going to go in that city and start being ignorant a certain way because you won't work there, because that's how it works.
So the sheriff patrols West Hollywood?
Yes.
Oh.
So the more effective policing that the community can trust is the kind of policing that is understanding and sensitive to the community they're policing. And that's just no other ways around it. Yeah. And I feel like we're getting better. I mean, there's a lot more education piece happening with racial profiling, training, doing all these things to implement, because a lot of it at the end of the day is just pure ignorance. Just people not knowing.
And you look at some of them, they look like babies.
Yeah.
Now, especially in our 40s, and you're looking at some of the officers, you're like, oh my goodness, you're out here. They haven't experienced a whole lot of life yet.
Right.
So I can see that being an issue.
Yeah.
And speaking about the continuing education, because I work for the county, we always have like we just had the implicit bias training and the training where we had a transsexual person, I think transsexual, sorry if I'm not using the correct term everyone, but someone come and talk to us and tell us the different, meanings and the different types of, sexualities or whatever you want to call it. And we have to do that like every 6 months, sometimes, annually.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same. They've implemented a lot more training, a lot more education.
Do you think that's more because of the whole George Floyd in 2020, or do you think that was going to happen anyway?
It was going to happen anyway, but those things absolutely, definitely floored it. Like, this is a major, clearly there's issues in policing and the way that we're policing Black and brown communities. Because I like to be specific. People say, well, the way, no, it's Black and brown communities that are suffering, that get the worst treatment in what we can look at. I mean, what are you seeing in the news? You know what I mean? What do we see happening? We're not seeing a white person get drugged around or done a certain way. And so it's, like I said, it's education, but also too, it is, if it's your community, you're gonna care a lot more.
Yeah.
Right.
Just really quick, I know we want to talk about you as Gaynell.
Okay.
But what about drugs in the streets? Because I remember in the 80s, that whole DARE program, that scared me so bad. It really worked for me, to the point where the DARE officer came with his luggage and showed us all of the drugs. And then he talked about suicide prevention. Do you know I went home that night and told my dad, because I was scared.
Oh my God. Wait a minute. You were scared you were going to commit suicide?
I was like in the 4th grade and I couldn't process for the kids? We need a dare. We need something,
You know,
or are we just talking?
I
to
do
them?
think there's still, you know, I do think there's still programs. They're not as prevalent as we once had.
Yeah,
Dare
they
and
showed like a
But the
second
president, I
campaign.
think, didn't the president and his wife start that thing?
Yeah, Reagan.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it worked.
It did. It scared me too. I just think that
Bumper stickers.
I know.
all kinds of
The
stuff.
it
t-shirts.
hasn't been a huge push. I mean, now I think we're getting more into this whole, like, I know the fentanyl
Right.
Yeah.
and kids overdosing.
Yeah.
I know that's like a big topic that a lot of times in schools they're like really kind of driving home. But the overall compass, like how Dare was about,
Right.
like, do not, it's all, you know what I mean?
It's all bad.
They've really moved away from that. I'm sure because, I mean, as you know, we've got pharmacies on the corners, marijuana pharmacies, and our laws changed. You know, before a controlled substance, a Schedule II controlled substance was a felony if you were caught with that, and now it's not.
Now
it's
it's
a
not.
misdemeanor and a ticket.
Wow.
So
If you get caught
they
with,
let
with
the guards
weed in the
down a little
car.
bit.
Yeah, with weed, unless it's a surmountable amount, like you're doing for sales, like for personal use, it's not really going anywhere.
So if
in
you
all honesty.
pull someone over, not you personally, if you pull someone over and they are visibly high, they
well,
won't
that's
go to
different
jail?
because that's driving.
That- yeah,
under
that's-
the
Oh,
influence.
that's something
But
else.
if you're in possession
Okay.
of something or another, it's really kind of like, I mean, you could. So that's another thing. It's like spirit of the law, letter of the law. So it's like we have so many violations of everything. I always tell people, it is so easy to go to jail. Like, honest and truly, if somebody if an officer just wanted to take you to jail, I mean, that's it. But we're taught that though too. We are taught and trained about spirit of the law, letter of the law. Not everybody that you come across, not everything that you see, you have to take someone to jail for that.
Right.
So there's ways that you can work with the person or to do, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
so the drug piece, because marijuana is not like it used to be, and now we've even moved to someone can have methamphetamine in their pocket and they're gonna get
On
a
the
ticket.
stop?
Oh yeah, they'll get a ticket. I mean, they're not, it's a crime still.
But
But
they're
it's not-
going to assume that they're going to use it, even if
But
they
it's
pull
not-
it
But
out
she's
of the
saying
corner
it's still
and-
a crime, but people
Right.
aren't worried because they're just going to get a ticket. Is what
They're
you're
not
saying.
gonna go immediately necessarily
Like
to
they
jail.
would in the 80s.
Right.
So times have
And
changed.
right, it has. And so there's a lot of, you know, and that's a whole nother discussion, because people feel very strongly about that, and things that are happening in our state very different from others. But you know, it's a
But fentanyl is
interesting
still
time.
the main thing that
that they're
we wanna
trying
talk
to
to our
educate the
children
kids
about, right.
because
it looks like
it's-
candy, or I just
and
say don't touch any
You
of
can
that
drop
stuff.
It's
edge
even
of
in
that
marijuana
stuff.
for
Yeah,
some
it's
people
laced,
thinking
yeah.
they're doing marijuana. You know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah.
It's a big thing, and it's a tragic thing too,
Yeah.
because there's so many young people that have no idea what they're
Yeah,
doing,
yes.
and they just die.
Yeah.
Like,
From one-time usage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, we thank you for your service. You say that for the police
Well,
officers.
Anyway,
Thank you. We thank you so much
Thank you for your service.
I-
For your patrolling and all of that.
Yeah, you are. You
I
really are
appreciate
a
it.
superwoman.
Yes.
I appreciate that, honest and truly. I
Especially
do.
doing that with small children. That's
Yes.
no small. You hear all these women on Instagram complaining about self-care and I need a bubble bath.
Yes.
This is somebody that needs
of
a
self-care,
care
right?
break.
Okay.
So now that you're
Definitely.
done with that, what are
Yes.
you doing in your middle age now that you've conquered
So I
policing?
am, you know, it's crazy. It was, I've been in a big transition in my life, and I feel like life is ever evolving in a way
Yeah.
that I didn't know when I was younger. I just thought, like, you do this, you do that, and your life just kind of,
Yeah.
And
it's
then you
like,
die.
yeah, it's not at all the case. I mean, I feel like I've lived a lot of little lives, but I've transitioned. I had been married. To go through a divorce is just not easy, even if you are the person who wanted out. It's hard with children, transitioning them into
Right.
a new life.
How many years were you married?
12, almost 12.
Oh, decent amount of time.
Yeah. The transition, not only for my children, I didn't realize what a huge transition for myself. I almost felt like, I don't even know if this makes sense, but I felt like I didn't even know who I was. It's like I was starting brand new.
Oh, you mean once the divorce was final, you're
like,
I'm not
to
start
own.
Yeah.
I was coming in, it was the first time, because remember I had a daughter early. It was the first time in my life, to be honest, because prior to my daughter, I was in high school and I lived with the house of siblings, and it was the first time in my life that I would turn a key and come in a house and there would be no one there. Like when the kids were with their dad. In the beginning, no one. Like literally just me.
Right.
And in the very beginning, it was hard for me. I turned to try to pacify myself with things because I felt like sometimes busying yourself is actually a trauma response because you don't want to face you don't want to deal with it. And that's what I did initially. I was really busying myself and just trying to until I couldn't, and I had to start being in the silence okay.
Yeah, you're so right, because that's a big thing that people don't talk about. When your kids go to be with dad, sometimes it's seen as glorified, like, oh, it's my break, but it might not always feel that way.
I've had a lot, it's a lot of lonely times, and not, it's, when people say, and this is just not probably like a popular opinion, but it's my feeling, is that when people say things like, you have to just, it's okay to be alone, and the solitude in life, you have to learn solitude, and you have, and I don't buy into that, because we need each other, and we're made to be together. We were in villages together, and even if you weren't with a romantic partner, there were families all living together and people hunkering down together. I just don't think humans are made to be alone. And when I've seen humans completely alone for long periods of time, I know what that looks like. It's not happy. It's not, it's not the joyous time. However, the solitude piece is necessary if you don't know, if you haven't really explored who you are. I really did not. I've always fit myself into a definition that everybody else had for me.
Wow.
It's like, oh, Gaynell, that does well in school. Gaynell, who's always energetic and enthusiastic.
I'll give you what? Gaynell with the good hair.
Right.
Gaynell, who,
that 90s.
Right. I know. And even in my marriage,
light skin.
I constantly felt like I was constantly trying to be in something. Look at me, I'm the best mom. Look at what I did, and I made this dinner, and I can do this, and all of those things were for somebody else and another definition, but not for me. Like, who was Gaynell? Like, honestly, when I divorced, I remember even looking in the mirror thinking like, whoa.
How old are you?
So I am 47. I divorced right at the cusp of my 40th birthday. There is something about coming to milestone birthdays. There were things that were already the underlying issues, but when I started getting close to that birthday, I was doing a lot of reflection. It was a lot going on for me, and it's not easy, but I had to make a decision for me. And it was like, this doesn't work for me anymore. None of this can be for me. And I had to choose myself. And I've heard people say, well, but what about your kids? That was so unfair. Take kids through a divorce and this, that, and the other. Kids don't ask to be. However, kids are only kids for a little short period of time, right? And then they will go on with their lives, and then you're still wherever you are. And also, for me, more importantly, is that I was never trying to teach my children about shadowing and lying about what is authentically going on with you. And I've always told my kids that if you get in something, whether it's a relationship, a school, and then your intentions were good, but it's not panning out.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid to say, this doesn't work for me anymore. And you have to pivot and you have to move, because I don't want you lying to yourself, hiding, pretending, because that brings a lot of shame. And for me,
and resentment in the long run.
It does. And unhappiness. And I felt like I have to be true at some point that I completely put all these things over myself, but I got to be real with myself. And what do I really want out of my life? And as I was getting closer to turning 40, it's like I had a completely unrealistic idea of what life was supposed to be for me or feel like, and I knew it didn't feel right. And I was like, I gotta move. And I don't know what's behind. The crazy part about change like that is you don't know what's next.
Yeah.
That's the scary piece, is like,
it's not
I don't know what's next. But I was willing to roll with it. And when I did, and you'll always know when you've done something that it was the way it was supposed to be for you, because as much as I was transitioning and there were lonely moments, I had a deep sense of peace and freedom that I had never felt, to be honest, ever. I mean, I had been a young mother at 18. I had always been having to do, there were these now periods of time, it was just me. And getting back to know who I was, like, what is it that I like? I didn't even really, like, I honestly was like, oh yeah, I remember I used to like these kind of movies. I'm always compromising with other people to watch what they wanted to watch. It's like, let me, like, okay, this is cool. I can roll with it. And in all of that, I have really come to be probably, I feel, the best I felt in my life. I mean, I'm at a time where I feel strong, the strongest I've ever felt, content within myself and like who I am, and not trying to play into everybody else's wants. But it took a long road to get here, and I still am evolving in a lot of ways as a mother, with children that are navigating divorce and being in that mode, and but we're rolling with it. I mean, life is what it is. But I feel like when you are being true to your heart and yourself, you just can't go wrong. I feel like that is the piece. That is the most important. It's the authenticity of being true to yourself. And I was so always caught up in a perception, and I needed to be this, and I need to be this. It's really like performative, like you're needing this validation from everybody, like, look, I did this, I'm okay. And then I was like, why am I doing that? Like, what do I care about? I need to be okay. I'm really not, though. I'm like telling everybody, and I'm doing this thing, but I'm not, and it was when I got real with myself. It's like, I'm okay. I can do this. Everything doesn't have to be a perfect picture to still be perfect in a way. It's like imperfectly perfect. Like, not every story is 25, 30-year marriage, and you know what I mean? Like,
it's your own story.
And it taught me a lot too about love, in that love is very expansive. I was always under the impression like, oh no, you just got this, you have this love, and then that's it. And then, so when you get married and you have that in your mind, when it fails, you're like, oh shit, what? And it really broke my feelings about love, and it made me do some exploration of what that is. And I really found that we are built with such a capacity of love, like so much so, and it surpasses romantic love. But in our life, we have all these mini love stories. We love our children, we love pets, we love friends, we love people. But the minute if we let one failed situation close us, or say, well, I thought that was love, so maybe I don't even know about love, and let me close off to love, it's just doing yourself a disservice. It's like the one thing that I have been braving myself to be open to is loving again. Whether it happens or not, I'm just in a place where I'm open. I haven't closed myself off, even in failure.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of just self stuff, of just also confronting ugly stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and being able to be brave enough to say, you did a lot of pretending, Gaynell, you know.
Wow.
You did a lot of like trying to be in a box that really wasn't your box.
Yeah, I think in your 40s, that's when
You
the
start
light bulb
realizing,
goes off. You're like, wait a
"Lord,
minute.
what have I been doing?"
Yeah, you come
Yes.
into your more authentic self, or
Yes.
who you want to be, or
Yeah.
trying new things, and not
Yes.
necessarily fitting into
Absolutely.
one
Absolutely.
form of yourself. There's so many
It is.
facets to us.
It's
We're not
really
just
is.
mothers. We're not just
No.
Yeah.
worker bees.
Right.
We're multifaceted. So
Right.
Absolutely.
I know.
beautifully said.
And speaking about divorce, it always feels like in the beginning, especially in the very beginning, feels like a failure, like you
does.
failed at something. But as you move through your life and get past it, and it gets so far behind you, and you can look in the rearview mirror and see that it really wasn't a failure, and maybe like you said, that was supposed to happen so that I can get to this next phase, because this is where I'm supposed to be, and hopefully we'll find love somewhere else with someone else.
Absolutely. And I feel like too, the moment that I stopped telling myself that because this failed, then this must not have been love. I must not have been in love. That was the first story I was telling myself. Maybe he wasn't in love with me. And then I realized, no.
And then they tell you that too. They tell you those things too, and that gets in your head, and you start thinking those things.
But then I realized, if love is so big, and God is love, and like we're so expansive, not every, I think it's don't start quoting, like I might be wrong, but in the Bible, or there's something I've read, it's like there's a season for everything.
Yeah,
it's like a season to dance, a season.
She said that's the Bible.
My thing is, the seasons of love also exist. And I feel like once I told myself a different narrative, which was, no, not every love is life sustainable. Just because it failed and ended didn't mean it wasn't love. It just wasn't a partnership to take me through life.
Yeah.
Because there's some partnerships that are very good in practical moving. Yeah, we can have kids together and we can do that piece, but maybe we can't do this other piece that I need to have done for a life partner.
Right.
And that's what I was like, and it made me feel better, because like you said, you can start feeling like, dang, like I failed, maybe I don't know how to love, or maybe this wasn't. Yeah, it's just, I started looking at it. The further I did get away from it, I started looking at it. Yeah, it was a time in my life. Yeah. It was a time for what it needed to do, and we have beautiful children, and that was a love story that just ended. It just wasn't a love story to go through the rest of my life with.
Right.
And that's why I say, like, sometimes there's just many love stories. There's little, Yeah, but and it takes courage to love, and it takes courage to love again.
Yeah, because you have to be vulnerable.
Put yourself out there and take the risk.
Yes,
because you don't know.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, speaking of getting back to yourself, you love to write. That's your passion. So can you tell us?
What are you writing? Is there a book coming?
So
I want the book about control.
Right. No, that's the movie.
That sounds juicy.
Right. So I think I've always loved writing from when I was young. My parents had cleaned out their shed, and there was a box, and it really touched me. But my mom had given me a folder. She's like, look at all these little writings you used to do in 4th grade, like making up stories. And I've always been an avid reader, so I've loved to read. I love to write. I have operated in writing very fear-based, though. Like, I'll write stuff, and then it's like,
it's not good enough.
I'm not ever doing anything with, and I used to tell myself the story that it's cathartic for me. Like, I write, and then I'm just doing that as a pastime. And then I will get these moments where I go revisit something or I look at things that I've written and I'm like, you could be doing something with this writing, Gaynell. Like, you got to believe in this for yourself. And then I just will move it along. This, probably in the last like 6 months, I get more, this is my time. Like, I think sometimes it's just not the time, even in yourself as an artist or wanting to be creative. I have been my biggest critic too. Like, I don't know, I wrote this and then, but all that to say, I have been working on a story for probably over a year, a love story, but a love story that is definitely unconventional in terms of, for instance, it takes place during slavery, but slavery, the movies, the stories, it's the atrocities of what happened to us as a people.
Right.
But I was thinking one day, like, if we were enslaved for this many years, all of the untold stories of love and families and things that were happening under that umbrella of that, but it was still happening and thriving. And I had just gotten this thought one day, and then I started writing this story, and it just kind of took a life of its own. I'm almost done. I've been like dragging to finish, but I'm almost done. As just kind of like a short novel, just a short read.
How many pages? What's short?
So
300 pages, 200 pages.
I think I'm still writing. I'm at the end though, so I would say about maybe close to a little over 300, maybe 300.
That's exciting. That's very exciting.
So yeah, but it's basically a love story of two people. I think when I write too, obviously they say there's a lot of truth in fiction. Clearly these characters aren't based off me, but the love stories are. There's things of experiences and the feelings and the portrayal of love that is there. So that's what I'm trying to finish up and do. I feel like I'm in a good space now to do it though. My kids are older. Yeah. So, you know, as you know, when kids get older, you just don't have that round the clock. You have to be on constant, you know, I can even leave the house, kids can be, and they do their own thing, and then they can be in the house and I can go somewhere and do something. And I tell moms all the time when I see them with their diaper bags and stuff, I'm like, it's only a season.
Yeah, that's a good way to say that. Instead of saying, what do people always say? Oh, they grow up so fast. So instead of that, you can say it's only a season. That's a good one.
It's a time, and it goes, and then you don't have that time anymore. And so it won't always be hard.
Yeah, you won't always have a million bags, car seats. Yeah,
there were times I used to drive and pull up in my driveway, and I'd sit in the driveway for a minute, listen to some music, look on my phone, and then I'd see them peeking out the window. I discovered what you out there. I'm like, okay, now my second job begins. But
so now you can have time.
Now I have a lot more freedom.
And
so I'm starting to, and there is something about that middle age, and I think that's what it is. It's like a rebirth.
Yeah.
Even if you're married.
And that's a good
way
to
put it. Like a rebirth of you. You've gone through a certain period of time in your life with careers and children and things, and then it stops. It moves into another thing.
So
it's like, wow, now
that's
this
really
is,
great.
You know?
Yeah, welcome to the rebirth. Right. That's what we'll call this episode. Welcome to the rebirth.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming by. You were so smart and just this was fantastic.
Thank you.
So please come back when you get your book.
I have a quick question before
Yes.
That was my last question.
Oh.
What are you planning to do? Are you going to publish? And then do you have any like expectations of a time?
So I do want to publish. I don't have expectations of a time. I did give myself a timeline that I would be finished no matter what by summer, by the beginning of summer. I need to finish it up, wrap it up, Gaynell. Because I can stay on things and like, you know. Although I've been on a good pace and I'm close to finishing. Just trying to make some decisions of how I want the story to close. But definitely, I mean, you know, I feel like I'm at a point in my life too that I'm comfortable with risk taking.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't,
so good.
and it's like I don't care, and
Yeah.
so what? At least I can say that I did it.
You did
Woo.
it.
So that's more important to me than
Yeah.
whether or not it gets picked, does this,
Yeah,
does
you
that.
did it,
I
and
just
you don't
wanna
have to
do it. I
wonder
wanna
if
finish.
Yeah.
what would have happened if
Absolutely,
you never did it.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Rebirth.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
ladies.
ladies, for
Thank you.
having me. Honestly.
You guys will catch you on the next episode. Don will be here. We missed you, Don.
Bye,
I'm so
Don.
sorry.
Bye.
Don't forget to like, share, and find every episode on YouTube. Peace.